SVC Media.
Welcome to the iGaming Daily Podcast, analysing the news from the betting and gaming industry all over the globe, supported by Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming market.
This week, it's emerged that one of Flutter's leading UK brands, Skybet, was relocating its company headquarters from Leeds to Malta. Far more than just swapping the gale force winds of Yorkshire for a bit of Mediterranean sun, it's estimated that Flutter will save tens of millions in tax, just as the Labour budget is about to be delivered on Wednesday. So what does this mean for Skybet and Flutter's UK strategy, and what does it tell us about confidence in the UK economy amongst operators? Welcome back to iGaming Daily, supported by Optimove, the creator of positionless marketing and the #1 player engagement platform. I'm Charlie Horner, and today I'm joined by SBC News editor Ted Orme-Claye and iGaming expert editor Joe Streeter. Ted, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you, Charlie. Always happy to come on and talk about Leeds, one of my favourite cities, a city that hosted us both at one point as well, I think. So, up Leeds.
Nice. Yeah, it's always nice to have Leeds back on the show. Joe, how are you? Any ties to Leeds?
Zero ties to Leeds, to be honest, but a big advocate for the north of England as somebody that's emigrated here from the south. So, yeah, still some pride, some northern pride on the podcast.
Yeah, a little bit of northern pride on the podcast, but it's not necessarily the greatest story for the north of England, is it? We should say that Flutter, Skybet aren't closing down its Leeds office. Far from it. They're just moving some of their roles to Malta for a bit more of a more tax efficient operation. But Ted, how about you kick us off and just give us an overview of what Skybet are doing here and a little bit about why it's caused a stir amongst some.
Well, I think most people's exposure to this story would have come when ITV News wrote something about it earlier in the week. It was widely reported that Skybet was upping and leaving to Malta, essentially. Obviously, like you say, it's not a straight, just full-on departure from Leeds. They're still having their HQ there. They've been quite a big employer in the city for many years. I think Skybet has been based there since 2010, which I believe would predate its acquisition by Flutter Entertainment via their takeover of the Stars Group and so on. So yeah, it's had a long time presence in Leeds, but they are moving some key decision-making roles in the commercial and marketing areas, from what we understand, though they are being relocated to Malta, which, as we've discussed many times on this podcast, is one of Europe's biggest iGaming hubs, probably the biggest iGaming hub, really, along with Gibraltar, and the Isle of Man being another big one, of course. But yeah, Malta, home to a lot of B2C and B2B firms. Gaming is a very significant part of its economy there, around 1/10 of the economy. And obviously a significant reason for that is because of the country's very low tax rates, with both gaming tax and corporation tax set at 5%, I think. So that is obviously a big motivating factor for a lot of companies to be located there as their sort of base of operations, while maintaining domains and maybe retail holdings and HQs and so on across various other countries, which is obviously, like Flutter being the world's biggest multinational, is their bread and butter.
Yeah, and that corporation tax rate of 5%, as you say, Ted, is compared to the UK where it's 25%, so quite a significant change. And I think this is part of a wider story as well, right? This isn't kind of an isolated story. It's part of a worrying kind of trend, or it could set a worrying trend in the UK. Leeds has become something of a hub, a northern hub anyway, for not just gambling, but tech. Various different industries are now thriving in Leeds. I think DAZN is based in Leeds. It really has become a hub. So the idea of Flutter no longer seeing it as attractive as it once was, whether that's due to tax, whether that's, for whatever reason, it's going to be worrying for the UK government as we approach a budget that has kind of fueled quite a lot of trepidation.
we're in this sort of age now, aren't we, where there's this narrative that everything in Britain is broken, it doesn't work, there's no value for money in the taxpayer anymore. And that's sort of, we're in this sovereign individual age, this sovereign company age where you can just up sticks and leave. You know, there's this quite a bit of a trend of lots of people working in the public sector, particularly doctors, moving over to Australia. There's lots of people and companies looking at Dubai as a place to go for a more a lower tax bill. And now we're seeing things like this where iGaming businesses are looking towards Malta. With that said, Joe, how much tax is Sky Bet set to save by making this switch?
Yeah, I mean, you have to dig kind of into the various elements of tax that they could save on this front. Corporation tax, probably the biggest one. Ted mentioned 5% as opposed to 25%. I think that's independent estimates from the Tax Policy Associate. Independent estimates yesterday, I think, from the Tax Policy Associates put this at around 31 million. So, yeah, Charlie, I love the UK. I love the north of the UK, as I mentioned. But if you said I could make some savings of 31 million by switching to Malta, well, yeah, book that ticket. Also, we know Sky Bet has a vast marketing portfolio. And yeah, they have a vast marketing portfolio with the EFL, the prime sponsor of the EFL, which I think will make this this move hurt a little bit more, because the EFL, I think, Charlie, you and I would call it Britain's greatest treasure.
Indeed.
But it's quintessentially British, right? It's part of our culture. So to have the company that sponsors that has its name on that, shifting away from the UK is kind of tough. But through this, and you're going to have to bear with me here, but they can join a EU VAT group, which will lead to even more savings. I think, whereas in the UK, gambling has been written off for VAT. I don't think you can claim VAT on gambling products and gambling marketing. They can put it as part of the EU VAT group, and they will be able to save, I think, another 15 to 20 mil a year, or around that amount anyway.
Mm-hmm. And there's no suggestion that Sky Bet are going to kill off their EFL deal, but it does speak to just this thing that the UK is not as attractive as it once was. So with that said, and all these savings that Joe has mentioned, Ted, are you that surprised that Sky Bet's made this move?
I mean, so this move of moving some commercial and marketing, like, lead sort of decision making roles, obviously happened back in June. I'd be lying if I said that that I expected to see it happen so soon. But I think something like this was always potentially on the table amid all of the very fierce discussions we've seen around taxation in this country at the moment, betting and gaming taxation, I should say, specifically obviously related to this sector. I mean, from a lot of the coverage Joe and I have done of this on our respective websites, I think that the political discussion around this has been like more fierce than the Gambling Act review. Maybe my memory is a little bit clouded because that was obviously a couple of years ago now. But like the intensity of some of the debates around this has been pretty heavy. And bookmakers are incredibly concerned about what impact it could have on their bottom lines. Obviously, like you mentioned earlier, Charlie, this isn't Sky Bet just completely bailing on the UK. They'll obviously still be operating here online. They're one of the leading bookmakers, if not maybe the leading online bookmaker, according to some estimates. So they wouldn't just cut off all of that market share that they have and that revenue stream. This is a way for them to mitigate and lessen the blow of what is widely expected to be a pretty hefty increase in tax bills. Among other things, I've mentioned, like in the statement that Flutter sent to SBC and iGaming Expert, they talked about like other efficiencies and things like that. But I don't think that moves like this should be seen as entirely surprising as companies get ready for an increase in taxation, and we could potentially see similar moves further down the line, depending on how how big the tax bill does bite into operators' revenue and bottom lines.
I think this is why the mainstream press, like ITV, have picked up on this, is because it's a big UK gambling operator trying to get some tax efficiencies just ahead of the budget where we all expect taxes to go up. But I think the main story for us here is start changing the confidence, the shaping, the framing of the UK and Flutter's confidence in the market. Because it is such a big employer, not just across Sky Bet, but with Paddy Power and Tom Bowler, fueling lots of jobs in, cities that are up and coming or have been underdeveloped compared to, say, London in the past. And we've also got to remember that Flutter took up a listing in New York as well, from the London Stock Exchange. So what? Just before we go to a break, Joe, I guess, what do you think this says about Flutter's confidence in the UK as a market?
Yeah, you mentioned there's a kind of a lot to react to there, Charlie, and I kind of want to, before I answer that, want to come to something you said about kind of mainstream coverage of this, and I think it's important to note that this, as we kind of head into the budget next week, I think probably all decisions have been made by now anyway, but this is a bit of a stick to beat the industry with, right? We saw that in Westminster yesterday. Operators shifting to Malta. It doesn't portray the industry in the best light. It's seen as this kind of this almost shady practice of tax avoidance. So yeah, it's meat and drink to a mainstream media that is not very pro gambling, I would say. And yeah, it just fuels. It does just fuel. For Flutter, it just highlights that there is kind of fear around the UK market too. You've got to remember all the various different elements that UK operators have had to deal with in recent years, whether it's the levy, the white paper, speculation of tax rises, and constant rumours of different raises are only going to fuel this fear even more. It speaks even as well to that date of the budget, that it was pushed back so far, but it's allowed for a lot of time for this kind of fear to reminate. But yeah, in terms of Flutter as an employer and Sky Bet specifically as an employer, they're massive. I think something like almost 5,000 people, more than 5,000 people across the UK, and I think when you work at Sky Bet, that's not a stopgap for most. That's a very good career path, and you can progress at Sky Bet. It's a place where kind of talent grows. So yeah, a big loss to the UK working economy, I guess.
Yeah, lots of really good tech jobs in Leeds through Sky Bet, and they've been a real pioneer of that. Well, Ted, Joe, we'll go to a quick break and we'll come back and we'll talk a little bit more about the political side of this.
SBC Leaders connects the gambling industry's top-tier operators and associations to share the best ideas, collaborate on solving the biggest issues, and push innovation throughout the betting and gaming industry. If you're an operator and want to join the discussion, visit sbcleaders.com for more information.
Welcome back to iGaming Daily. Today we're talking all about Sky Bet and its corporate relocation to Malta. We said before the break that there's been some negative press around this. The reaction in the press and in Westminster has been slightly negative. Just to give a little bit of devil's advocate, aren't Flutter and Sky Bet a little bit late to the party with this one? Don't basically every other major operator in the UK and across Europe have some sort of corporate structure or some kind of headquarters in somewhere like Malta or Gibraltar in order to be a little bit more efficient on the tax front? Ted, what do you make of this one?
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong at all. And obviously, like you said, Joe made a very good point about this towards the end of the first half of this. Yeah, this is not an unusual practice at all. It's quite long running. Malta in particular, I think often it hosts a lot of the more Europe focused brands, doesn't it? Although ones that do also target the UK as well. But a lot of the brands that we know quite well in the UK, like you said, Charlie, are often have a Gibraltar domicile, or sometimes the Channel Islands or the Isle of Man. They seem to go for the British overseas territories where there are lower tax rates, whether corporate or gaming. And yeah, Skybet. It's interesting that really that Skybet has chosen Malta in that regard. Actually, when I compare them to a lot of the other major British online betting and gaming operators that we know of, who tend to go for more of the British overseas territory kind of aspect. So yeah, that is Skybet, I guess, like you said, in a sense, being late to the party. But this is, like Joe said, also something that has caused some controversy around the industry, particularly in this whole very fierce tax debate. Like we saw this during the Treasury. It was the Treasury Select Committee, wasn't it, during their hearings a couple of weeks back, where one of the things they were asking the attendees about was the practice of operators moving abroad for tax reasons. And Stuart Kenny, the co-founder of Paddy Power, who's now become quite a vocal advocate for gambling reform, particularly in the Republic of Ireland, obviously where he is based, but was offering his opinions on it to the UK market as well, where Paddy Power is active. He talked about how they'd looked at doing that of a relocation to Gibraltar, which he said was for tax purposes, and I think the MPs definitely took a negative view of that practice. It seemed like it. It seemed like that in their post-hearing report as well. They made some recommendations for the government around that, so it wouldn't surprise me if we start seeing a bit more political pressure on that practice as we go forward. Whether or not that will be adopted by the government is a different case, because the government have got various things to consider. But yeah, I think that will definitely continue to be a talking point.
Yeah, maybe this is purely speaking from sentiment, but it does kind of resonate a little bit more as well, because Skybet feels very British. It feels like it's kind of a British institution, maybe more than other bookmakers, for whatever reason, whether that's down to the links with Sky Sports, or whether that's down to kind of the portfolio of British ambassadors that are kind of sporting icons, possibly a big part because of the sponsorship of the EFL as well. But it does feel like a very British institution that's moving to Malta. So it does resonate a little bit more, and whether that will have a little bit more impact on mainstream news headlines and on the government as well. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. One thing where I do think there's going to be some pressure is that these are, this is a northern brand, a northern business in Leeds. It just so happens that Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, her constituency is Leeds West and Pudsey, which is it's the west side of Leeds. It's not the city centre, but just in the neighbouring constituency is Skybet's headquarters in Leeds. I think that might be something that could put a bit more pressure on the already embattled Chancellor, who is facing this budget next week, which is going to be brutal. And it feels like she's already, dilly-dallied about whether income tax is going to go up, whether it's not, whether it's going to come from businesses instead. So, I guess, Joe, do you think there's going to be some more political fallout from this kind of move, or when the Chancellor is already facing so much pressure?
She's going to be under the cosh anyway next week. I think this is just going to be part of a wider story, if I'm honest. I think the news headlines will move on, but I think this will be part of a wider story. But interestingly, and maybe it's because of the timing, it has moved the needle. We saw that at PMQs yesterday. Liberal Democrat leader Davey, he raised a question. He brought it to the front line. He brought it to Keir Starmer. We've also got Question Time tonight, not to plug another show, but let's see if it gets mentioned on Question Time. And I think it has moved the needle in Westminster. I think and the fact that it's a northern town as well, so close to her constituency, only adds to the narrative. But the fact that it is a northern town that was thriving as a tech hub, I hope to see it continue thriving as a tech hub. But this will be a setback, no doubt.
Yeah, I mean, I'd really just sort of reiterate what Joe said. And, if you look at the job that the Reeves and the Treasury have at the moment, they are really stuck in between a rock and a hard place, I think, with needing to raise public finances and fill a pretty significant black hole in public finances that they have now acknowledged as well. And funnel that into like the various investment and infrastructure projects they've got. But they've also been over the past year trying to attract businesses to the UK, like from overseas. They were able to attract some countries actually to register in the UK. They've registered their domiciles here. I think the Brazilian fintech Nubank, who are quite big, like a huge company there, agreed to do so. And now they're facing the potential consequence of raising taxes, on companies, on corporations, to fill that black hole that may potentially deter firms from doing this and potentially push other companies away. And then there's also the added pressure of the people within their own party calling for an increase in taxes, particularly the whole thing around increasing gambling taxes to pay for this scrapping of the 2-child benefit limit, and that whole concept that's being supported by Gordon Brown. This is just adding another layer to the various considerations that they've got, and it's going to make even though, like Joe said, I'd imagine by this point the decisions have already been made, but it's going to have made that decision-making process a lot more difficult, and it's not a job I'd want.
Yeah, the gambling sector is facing a really tough optics problem at the moment. I mean, you outlined some of the political issues there, Ted, but Ed Davey asked a question in PMQs yesterday. I don't know whether he sort of slid into Parliament on a water slide or something before asking that question, but I think it's sort of brushed off by the Prime Minister, as you would probably expect. But this news story, there have been other news stories. There's been the UK Gambling Commission publishing quite a few enforcement action news posts in the last few weeks. Ahead of the budget next week, we know, let's say we know that these taxes are coming in. Those decisions aren't going to be changed now. I think we're all excited to when we don't have to anticipate the budget anymore. But it doesn't help the optics or the PR of the industry, does it, with all this going on, Joe?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say, Charlie, to be honest. And I think the way Ed Davey framed the question really, and I mean, he is certainly on the left of British politics, but I think the way he framed the question yesterday, and I can't recite it word for word. I'm a fan of PMQs, but not that much of a fan. The way he framed the question certainly speaks to how this story is being portrayed. It's being portrayed as this is kind of almost a shady move as such, and a move to dodge tax, and another kind of act of dark arts from the gambling industry. That's how the question was being framed, it felt to me anyway, by Ed Davey yesterday. So I think, the optics aren't great as we kind of head into this tough period. But also, I do think people can see this for what this is. That was Ed Davey, of course, but I think the general public and more people can kind of see this for what it is, that this is as a result of increasing pressure and increasing costs from the government. The gambling industry isn't alone in feeling this tax burden and this increased cost burden. So I think I think they can see why this is happening. It's not entirely resonating with the general public that this is the move that Ed Davey was portraying it as.
I think Joe's hit the nail on the head there, really. I think the industry PR in that sense is of the utmost importance right now. I think Ed Davey's point and the Treasury Select Committee's points and arguments around the tax domiciles and so on don't exactly reflect well on the industry at the moment, especially when it's been making the case. And also often, very rightly so, making the case about how much of a tax contribution it does make, with a lot of the biggest PLCs generating, billions in tax for the Treasury. But while making that argument, and then also looking at ways to reduce their bill or soften the blow, and potentially moving abroad to do that, doesn't look great. And we've also seen quite a few cases of the Gambling Commission doing enforcement actions, whether like penalties or license suspensions against a few different firms lately, which no matter the reasons for those, again, doesn't always reflect well on this industry, and it can make it a lot easier for people who want to see tighter restrictions or see heavier taxes to make their case and go, well, they can't be trusted to do this, so let's just let's change some things about. Everyone needs to be at the top of their game at the moment, basically.
Mm-hmm. And I think there is a alternative and positive story to tell, and a lot of that we have spoken about in this podcast today. Those tech-driven jobs in cities outside of London, which is contributing towards the economy rather than being a drain on the economy. But Ted, Joe, will continue this conversation another time, and I'm sure we'll be reacting to the budget when it comes through next week. So in the meantime, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to me about this one today. And thank you to the listeners for tuning into today's episode of iGaming Daily. We'll drop some story links into the show notes so you can take a read of these stories even further. And join us tomorrow for another episode to keep up to date with all the latest global gambling news.
Thank you for listening to today's iGaming Daily podcast, supported by Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming market. If you want to find out more about some of the subjects raised today, feel free to explore any of the sites in the SBC News network or check out the latest edition of the SBC Leaders magazine. Happy reading.